Chapter 1854. God. God, I'm in so much pain. The silver hair of the figure in his arms was already wet with cold sweat. She opened her unfocused eyes and stared blankly at the empty space in front of her. She could only scream unconsciously. God's heart twitched. Looking at Carrie like this, an emotion that he had never felt before rose in his heart. Close to the left side of his heart, there was a faint, fine pain. He put Gu Xingyin into the holy pond of the great cathedral. The holy pond was completely golden with faith and Holy Spirit power. Gu Xingyin used to like this place the most. But now, as soon as her body sank in, the water in the holy pond boiled. Before she could scream in pain, a warm body hugged her from behind. Cool and gentle energy flowed into Gu Xingyin's body from every part of her body. When the dark power encountered this cool and gentle energy, it all retreated anxiously as if it had encountered a flood or a ferocious beast. But how could their speed compare to this energy? Like spring snow meeting the sun. The dark power was swallowed and melted when it encountered this energy. Nothing was left. The pain in her body seemed to slowly lessen. The pain on Gu Xingyin's face gradually disappeared, and she gradually calmed down. She let out a soft moan and relaxed her back, leaning towards the back of the bed. Her body's instincts told her that she could rely on that place. God's miracle doctor froze because of this. Just now, to ensure that his divine power could be used on Carrie to the greatest extent, he used a spell to take off their clothes. Earlier he was anxious, and Carrie's body was stiff from the pain. He didn't notice this at all. But now he could feel Carrie's soft body leaning into his arms. He could clearly feel her soft and smooth skin rubbing against his body. God. He had never had such an intimate moment with any living creature. At this time, the book of creation appeared out of nowhere. God. Your ears are a bit red. Pa. God waved his hand subconsciously. The book of creation flew out of the holy church in a parabola and landed at the feet of a seraph, Lucifer, who was just about to report to the holy church. When he saw what was under his feet, his pupils shrank. He recognized the book of creation, the divine artifact that accompanied God. Who would dare to throw the book of creation around like that? There was only one answer. Lucifer stopped in his tracks. He bent down and picked up the book of creation that was lying on the ground, pretending to be dead. He closed it again and asked gently, Book of creation, is it inconvenient for God to see me now? The book of creation had always been fond of the beautiful Lucifer. It cleared its throat, intending to maintain its dignity as a divine artifact, and said with a serious tone, The God is currently busy. If there is nothing important, Your Highness, please come back another day. If they were to disturb God at this time, even His Highness Lucifer wouldn't have a good ending. Lucifer was quite perceptive. He hurriedly said, There is nothing important. I will come back another day. After Lucifer left, the book of creation looked sadly at the sky. Sigh. I don't know if God can truly understand my feelings this time. 4 chapters. I'll try to write 2 more chapters before dinner. Begging for monthly votes. The monthly votes list has been dropping since the 2nd. Crying. Chapter 1855. Gu Xingyin was still a little confused. As far as she could remember, she had never seen such a god. Without the layer of holy light that always separated him from the world, there seemed to be a trace of human emotions in his indifferent golden eyes. However, he was indeed the god of creation. God! She shouted uncertainly. God's gaze softened. He reached out a hand. Gu Xingyin was a little confused. God said, You've been asleep for a long time. Gu Xingyin was confused. So, was there something wrong? Although she was puzzled, Gu Xingyin still obediently reached out her hand and put it in God's hand. It turned out that God's palm was so warm. Then she stood up. The moment she supported her body with her legs, Gu Xingyin finally understood why God reached out to her. Her leg muscles were sore and weak, and she couldn't exert any strength at all. What was wrong with her? Gu Xingyin's attention returned to her body from God's abnormality. She confirmed her previous feeling. She couldn't find the slightest bit of light energy in her body now. In other words, Carrie, who was once powerful enough to be comparable to the seraph in heaven, had now become a useless person with an empty body. God wrapped his arms around Gu Xingyin's waist and held her in his arms. Gu Xingyin was shocked. She felt that this God was very strange. She looked at God in shock. Based on her understanding of gods over the past tens of thousands of years, God was definitely not such a gentle God who would casually allow others to get close to him. So, how long had she been asleep? What had happened in this short period of time? God naturally saw Gu Xingyin's surprise. He didn't explain anything. After confirming that Carrie seemed to have lost the power to walk freely for the time being, he directly exerted force in his arms and carried her up. If Gu Xingyin's emotions were countless messy symbols when she was held by God earlier, then now, they were a bunch of incomprehensible codes. God, she said with difficulty. Carrie can do it herself. God's hand didn't move as he walked towards the holy pond. You can walk? He asked indifferently. Gu Xingyin felt a little strange. He could have just teleported her directly to the holy pond, so why did he have to carry her personally? The next moment, she was surrounded by a warm energy. Then, she realized that her body was empty, and the clothes on her body had disappeared. Gu Xingyin. There was still a God on the other side. She couldn't help but raise her head to look at his expression. As expected, his face was still calm, as if he didn't care about the perfect body in front of him at all. But even so, it was still very embarrassing. God said, 3,000 years ago, you were attacked by chaos darkness. The light power in your body was polluted. It has been completely purified by the holy pond. What he said was basically what Gu Xingyin had been through all these years. 3,000 years? Gu Xingyin was a little dizzy from this timeline. Was this really heaven? The days passed like flowing water. Then, the power in her body was purified, which meant, from today onwards, you need to start absorbing the light power again and slowly recover your previous strength, God said. Gu Xingyin nodded. Although she felt like she had returned to the time before liberation, she had nothing to do in heaven anyway. Chapter 1856. God looked at Carrie with a calm expression. He didn't seem to be very disappointed. He was relieved. God knew that many angels were very obsessed with power. Losing great power was something that many angels could not accept. He was worried that Carrie would be sad, but obviously he underestimated Carrie's temperament. That was good. In that case, it was time to get down to business. Gu Xingyin found that God, who should have left, didn't leave. Instead, he looked at her with a serious face. His eyes made her a little confused. She also felt a little guilty. Wait, why did she feel guilty? Gu Xingyin thought about it, and felt that she didn't do anything. So she asked, God, what's the matter? She meant that if there was nothing, he could go back to the great sage hall. God nodded solemnly and said, yes, there is something. Gu Xingyin wanted to say that even if he had something to do, he could wait for a while. It seemed inconvenient for her now. Then God spoke. I'm hugging you. Don't you like it? Gu Xingyin's eyelids trembled. What kind of question was that? She looked at God with confusion. She really wanted to pull out the system and ask if the person in front of her had been possessed. But the clear lotus fragrance and the familiar soul feeling from the person beside her made her know that the person in front of her had always been the God of creation. He had never changed. So what was wrong with him? Was God stimulated by something? No, that was not the point now. The point was, how should she answer now? Say that she liked him? To be honest, she did like him. But according to the laws of heaven, God didn't like this kind of thing. Gu Xingyin couldn't guarantee what kind of reaction God would have if she said she liked him. But he didn't like her? She didn't want to lie against her heart. God looked at her for a long time without speaking. Then he asked, is it difficult to answer my question? Gu Xingyin looked up and nodded gently. I like it. She decided to tell the truth. Since she said she liked him, she might as well go all out. Gu Xingyin looked up at God and said, Carrie likes to be close to God. After she finished speaking, she looked at God in front of her and waited for his reaction. Then, in the next moment, his body was surrounded by a wave of warmth. It wasn't the warmth of the holy pond, but a real body. Gu Xingyin was terrified. Save me. What happened in the past 3,000 years? Why can't I understand it at all? Deity said in a low voice, That's good. I also like being close to Carrie. Gu Xingyin was stunned. What did she just hear? Gu Xingyin stood there in a daze, allowing their skin to touch. She forcefully closed her eyes and felt the warmth around her. Once again, she was sure that she was not dreaming. She turned around and faced the god's face. Her voice trembled as she said, "God." His golden eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. His lips didn't move, but his low voice sounded in the center of her mind. "Don't doubt what's in front of you, Carrie. I like you." Gu Xingyin's eyes suddenly widened because of this. It seemed that at this moment, Carrie's emotions controlled her. Shock, ecstasy, and sadness made her want to cry. She had buried the feelings in her heart for hundreds of thousands of years. She was even prepared to never say them out loud. Who would have thought that one day she would get a response? The 8th update. There are 2 more updates. Tomorrow, I'll try to set an update time on time, so that everyone doesn't have to update all the time. After the last 2 updates, I'll think about which time is better. See you later. Chapter 1857. Gu Xingyin stared at God in a daze. She only felt that everything in front of her was too unreal. How did you? She wanted to ask so many things, but when she opened her mouth, she forgot where to start. A gentle kiss landed on her eyelashes. Don't doubt it. Don't be nervous. Jiao Yan, accept me. Just like accepting the faith from the light. That's good. Nobody knew when it started, but the water in the sacred pond started to sway gently. A low sobbing sound rang out, and then it was forcefully blocked by something. There was no day or night in heaven. The Book of Creation squatted on the throne board. It was connected to the God of Creation's body and mind. At this moment, the Book of Creation was very clear about what its master was doing. Finally, it was enlightened. It thought with relief. A gust of wind from somewhere suddenly blew. The pages of the Book of Creation flipped automatically and landed on a certain page. The Book of Creation's heart shook. This was the scene of the future that it and God had forcibly seen together. But this time, it wasn't forcibly seen. The Book of Creation had automatically shown it. There was only one possibility for the future to appear in the Book of Creation. An established and unchangeable fate. The Book of Creation suddenly felt that any gossip was meaningless. Its low voice sighed in the great cathedral. Your Highness. When God appeared in the great cathedral again, the Book of Creation had returned to its former appearance. How is Her Highness Jiao? It asked. God glanced at it. A little tired. She's resting now. The Book of Creation didn't speak. God sat on the throne. After a long time he suddenly said, What did you see? As the master of the Book of Creation, he naturally sensed certain things. Seeing that God asked, the Book of Creation didn't say anything. Its body floated automatically, and a scene appeared in the void. God watched this scene expressionlessly from beginning to end. In the end, he lowered his noble head. I'm sorry. The Book of Creation comforted its master. It's not your fault, God. This is destiny. God suddenly looked up. What is destiny? As the God of creation, why can't I go against the will of heaven? The Book of Creation. It didn't know how to answer this question. In the end, deity fell silent. When Gu Xingyin woke up again, she was still on the bed where she woke up for the first time. But this time, she finally knew where she was. In the sleeping chamber of God. Of course, God usually sat on his throne, and this sleeping chamber was rarely used. She sat up. Thanks to the powerful recovery ability of this body, she did not feel any strong discomfort. Once again, he sighed with emotion. As expected of a god, this powerful endurance, she remembered that she seemed to have fainted in the end. The soft, snow-white quilt slid down from her body, revealing her naked body under the brocade. Starting from her collarbone, faint circles of red marks appeared on Carrie's pure and holy face, tainting it with the charm of lust. Gu Xingyin habitually looked inside her body, and was surprised to find that there was a strong power of light in her body. Although it couldn't be compared to before she fainted, it was much better than when she had just woken up. Chapter 1858. The power of faith in the holy pond was so powerful? Gu Xingyin thought of something and blushed. At this time, God's voice sounded in her ear. "You're awake?" Gu Xingyin responded softly. Then she put on her clothes and walked into the great cathedral. God was still the same as before, but when he saw Gu Xingyin come out, he removed the power of light from his body. "Come here." God reached out to her. Gu Xingyin walked forward without hesitation and reached out her hand. Then God pulled her into his arms. Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. Even if they were in a relationship, God didn't look like someone who would do such intimate things. God seemed to see her doubts. He explained softly, "The book of creation told me that you would like this." Gu Xingyin's ears blushed quietly. The book of creation squatting next to the throne was speechless. "God, please don't be so straightforward about some things. You deserve to be single for hundreds of thousands of years." But after God said this sentence, it seemed to have a good effect. The slight discomfort in Gu Xingyin's heart magically disappeared. Maybe when she was shy and uncomfortable, she suddenly found that the other person was a stranger than her. She suddenly calmed down. God said, "I will make our relationship public at the next creation celebration." Gu Xingyin was a little surprised. The first surprise was that God was going to make their relationship public. In this case, some laws in heaven would have to be changed. Gu Xingyin was also curious about what kind of new identity God was going to prepare for her. There was a second point. Why was it the next creation celebration? Was there anything special about it? She asked the question. God replied, "Of course you are my queen. Since you and I are together, it is natural for you to be my queen." As for the second point, God hesitated for a moment and then said, "Something bad will happen at the next creation celebration. Carrie, it's not appropriate to announce this news." Gu Xingyin always felt that when God said something bad, there was a moment of guilt on his face. However, the guilt only lasted for a moment. She wasn't sure if it was just her imagination. Her attention was quickly attracted by something else. Something that even God thought was bad. She was a little worried. But he also knew that since God didn't say what it was definitely not suitable for him to know. The two of them chatted for a while. God suddenly said, "You have been in a coma for so many years. Lucian and the others are very worried. Now that you have woken up, go and meet with them." Gu Xingyin also felt that she needed to inform her companions. She returned to her palace and sent a message to the other blazing angels in her own name. The archangel's residence was the closest to the crystal sky. Lucifer was also the first to arrive at Gu Xingyin's place. He had a joyful smile on his face. "You're finally awake, Carrie." Gu Xingyin smiled at Lucifer. "Thank you for your concern, Your Highness. I'm fine now." However, the smile on Lucifer's face stopped the next moment. His pale blue eyes were once again covered with melancholy. "Your body." Obviously, he had noticed that something was wrong with Gu Xingyin's body. Had Sung Jin's power, which was comparable to his, disappeared? Gu Xingyin herself didn't care very much. Seeing Lucifer like this, she took the initiative to comfort him. "It's not a big deal. You will slowly recover in the future." Today's 10th update. Today a baby proposed a fixed update time. Now set the time. If nothing goes wrong, it will be 8 chapters a day. 6:04 in the afternoon. 10:04 in the evening. Please vote. I'm going to write V Group Welfare and let myself go. Good night. Chapter 1859. There was still a trace of worry in Lucifer's eyes, but when Gu Xingyin looked over, he tried to make himself show a relaxed smile. He knew in his heart that since Carrie said that, she definitely didn't want to see her companions worry about her. The other seraphs also came quickly. Michael was still making a ruckus. When he saw Gu Xingyin, he said hurriedly, "Jiao Yan, you're finally awake. I heard from God that you were injured and unconscious. Now you." He was halfway through his words when he stopped halfway. Obviously, like Lucifer, Michael also noticed that there was something wrong with Gu Xingyin's body. The other seraphs also looked at her with worried eyes. Gu Xingyin could only repeat her conversation with Lucifer again, and said that she was fine and didn't need to be too worried. Medellin saw that she didn't seem to want to talk about this topic, so he smiled and said something casually to change the topic. Gu Xingyin was attracted by what Medellin said. She asked curiously. Medellin, you said that an emissary who specializes in spreading the gospel of God has appeared in the human world, and is already regarded as God's spokesperson in the mortal world. Medellin nodded with a look of admiration. Yes, I once went down to the human world to see the Holy Son. He is indeed a very outstanding believer. His words didn't hide his praise for the mortal called Holy Son at all. Lucifer also smiled and said, It is a great fortune for God to have such a believer in the human world. Gu Xingyin frowned slightly. She always felt that when she heard the name Messiah, she had a strange feeling in her heart. Maybe she was thinking too much. She comforted herself. He was just a mortal. Even if he was a great sage and wise man in the human world, what did it matter if his soul was taken into heaven after death? He and the seraphs had no conflict at all. At this time, Gu Xingyin didn't know that she thought of everything too simply. At this time, when the 8 seraphs of heaven talked about the Holy Son called Messiah, they still smiled and didn't pay attention to it. The lifespan of mortals was short. Moreover, a day in heaven was equivalent to a year in the mortal world. Gu Xingyin soon saw the true appearance of the Messiah. God had personally conveyed the oracle to all the angels. Go to the great cathedral and have an audience with the Holy Son. Gu Xingyin was shocked. God actually used the word audience. Since the birth of heaven, there had only ever been 8 blazing angels who were qualified to be met by all the angels. Was God going to bestow this mortal with supreme glory? She arrived at the great sage hall and looked at her companions. She could clearly see the bewilderment on their faces. Lucifer was still standing closest to God. As long as he stood there, he would be the most dazzling existence among the many seraphs. Just like his title, Brilliant Morning Star, the brightest star at dawn before the birth of dawn. Many angels didn't understand what was going on, but when they saw the gentle smile on His Highness Lucifer's face, they calmed down. God came quickly. At the same time, all the angels discovered that when God appeared on the throne, a figure also appeared in the void in front of him. Blonde hair, blue eyes, and a holy smile on his face. His appearance was very beautiful, not inferior even among the angels. Chapter 1860. He did not look around. Instead, he lowered his head slightly and faced the God in front of him with a very respectful posture. God's indifferent voice reached the ears of all the angels. Holy Son Messiah, my substitute in the human world, the great wise one who preaches the gospel. Now that you have returned to heaven, you should be a seraph. As soon as God's voice fell, the spirit of speech instantly took effect. Gu Xingyin, who was not far from Messiah, clearly sensed that as the God's words fell, the power in Messiah's body in front of her was continuing to grow at a very terrifying speed. That powerful and uncontrollable aura directly forced her body to go soft, and she almost retreated. A hand promptly supported her body from behind, and a gentle light energy flowed into her body, offsetting the discomfort she felt. Gu Xingyin knew who it was. The only one standing on her right was the seraph captain Lucifer. Gu Xingyin could not speak now. She could only turn her head and smile gratefully at Lucifer. She knew that if she had really been forced back by Messiah's aura just now, then in the eyes of the other angels, she would not be able to defeat Messiah. Although heaven was not purely based on strength, if she really showed that she was not as good as Messiah, her prestige among the angels would definitely be greatly reduced. Gu Xingyin did not have any hostility toward this companion, but she did not want to be used as a stepping stone on the first day of his official debut. Messiah seemed to take a while to adapt to his new identity. He knelt down excitedly to God, indicating that from now on, he would be more determined in his faith and serve God wholeheartedly. The next ceremony was for Holy Son Messiah to accept the worship of all the angels as a seraph. Looking at Messiah, who was worshipped by countless high-level angels, a strange thought suddenly arose in Gu Xingyin's mind. Something seemed to have changed in this heaven. It was different from her worries. The other seraphs were still very welcoming to the sudden addition of a companion. Although it was a little sudden, in their minds, being able to get the approval of God meant that Messiah was indeed worthy of this honor. In the eyes of the angels, the will of the gods was the highest law. Messiah's personality was very good. Compared to the seraphim highnesses who had always been high and mighty in the hearts of the angels, He was more easygoing. Soon, he had a large group of admirers in heaven. Gu Xingyin felt more and more uneasy. She always felt that there was a special meaning behind God's actions. She went to see God alone. There was no intimate snuggling. She knelt on the white jade floor of the great sage hall in an extremely serious and pious manner, expressing her uneasiness. Deity listened to her quietly. Gu Xingyin felt a gentle force lift her up. Then the words of God rang in her ears. Carrie, I'm going to do something that I'm very unwilling to do, but I can't change. Don't get involved. This matter. For the first time, Gu Xingyin realized that there were still things in this world that the God of creation could not solve. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind. Was it because of the balance between light and darkness? She knew this. She had seen the flaw of this world a long time ago. The power of light was too strong. Chapter 1861. As a person who had once been a god, Gu Xingyin was very clear about one thing. That was, for two opposing elements, it was not a good thing for one side to be strong. One side would weaken while the other would strengthen. Whether it was light or darkness, it was not a good thing for the stability of the world. When one side fell into an extreme stage of weakness, the elements of the entire world would collapse. And the best symbiotic state was to balance each other. On this basis, whether it was light or darkness, they would develop in the most prosperous direction. This trend was the correct path for the world to reach the most prosperous stage. But this world obviously did not take this path. At least since Gu Xingyin was born, she had never found any existence in the dark camp that could lead hell to prosperity. Relying on those demon kings who only knew how to fight, wine and beauty, hell would be finished sooner or later. Gu Xingyin returned to her palace. She did not rest, but sat quietly in the hall alone, and began to slowly think about the way God might do it. Judging from the current ratio of light and dark forces, the difference was too great. Unless the dark side could give birth to a new god, then it would be possible to slowly recover its vitality, and make hell a place that could compete with heaven again. If there was a god of darkness, it would not have waited until now. Since the God of creation was the light, in any case, the advantage of heaven had clearly been revealed. Then there was another possibility, which was to weaken the power of the light camp. Gu Xingyin's heart trembled. She did not understand. Why did God still give the honor of the Holy Son Messiah at such a time? The combat power of a seraph was equivalent to that of a demon king, and the number of seraphs in heaven had far exceeded the number of demon kings in hell. This would only further exacerbate the imbalance between light and darkness. Unless her heart skipped a beat. Carrie, I am going to do something that I am very unwilling to do, but I can't change. She did not dare to think about it anymore. God, what exactly do you want to do? Because of her body, Gu Xingyin had not been to Angel Academy for a long time. And she also knew that during her sleep, the major events of Angel Academy were basically decided by Lucifer. Gu Xingyin was convinced by this perfect archangel. She always felt that there was nothing in this world that Lucifer did not know. She thought of the group of cute little fellows from Angel Academy, and walked into the teleportation array. Your Highness Messiah, I want to play too. Her Highness Messiah. As soon as she entered Angel Academy, Gu Xingyin saw a figure playing with many little angels. The Sun Messiah. Just like Carrie, God did not give him a specific position. Other than accompanying God, Messiah was free for the rest of his time. Seeing his body playing with the little angels, Gu Xingyin had to admit that Messiah indeed had a very outstanding personality. The little guys standing at the side saw Gu Xingyin. Are you the Highness from above? The little fellow pointed to the sky. In the eyes of little angels, the more beautiful an angel was, the more powerful they were. The angel in front of him was so good-looking. He must be a very powerful prince. Gu Xingyin smiled. Yes, I. Before Gu Xingyin finished speaking, she found that Messiah had walked in front of her. Your Highness Carrie. Messiah looked at Gu Xingyin with eyes full of amazement. Chapter 1862. Gu Xingyin had no choice but to nod at him. Messiah. Her position among the seraphs was recognized as second only to the seraph leader, so she didn't need to bow to Messiah. Your Highness Kalia. The little angel widened her eyes in surprise. Gu Xingyin could clearly see her figure in her pure green eyes. The little angel blinked her big eyes and looked at Gu Xingyin excitedly. I heard from Teacher Guard that Your Highness Kalia is our dean, right? Gu Xingyin couldn't help but pinched the little angel's little face. Yes, but I had something to do before, so I haven't been here for a long time. The little angel immediately hugged Gu Xingyin's thigh. Gu Xingyin. Since when did hugging someone's thigh become popular in heaven? Then, even more little angels crowded around them. They had all heard that Her Highness Kalia, who had never shown her face, was here and were very curious. After coming over and seeing Gu Xingyin's face, which could be said to be one of the best in the world, they immediately forgot about Messiah, who was playing with them before. They surrounded Gu Xingyin and asked all kinds of questions. Messiah smiled as she looked at Gu Xingyin, who was surrounded by little angels. But there was a hint of helplessness in her eyes. After such a long time, she finally realized. Although the angels treated her very respectfully, and she tried her best to integrate into heaven, but in the hearts of the angels, she was still different from those who were born as seraphs. Although they respected her, it was better to say that they respected her more because she was the Holy Son and equal to the seraphs. But not because of Messiah. But the other seraphs were different. Looking at the reactions of the angels and little angels, she knew. They admired and were curious about Kalia, not Her Highness Kalia, and His Highness Lucifer. Messiah thought of the seraph leader, who was so powerful that she couldn't help but want to submit to him. His Highness Lucifer was an existence that could make the angels willingly submit to him, right? Even if he was not a radiant morning star, nor was he heaven's deputy ruler, his personal charm was enough to make many angels follow him. Messiah withdrew her gaze. She looked at Carrie, who was surrounded by the little angels, and left quietly. The atmosphere in heaven was a little strange recently. Ever since Her Highness Messiah came down, God had doted on him more and more. No matter what he did, he would bring Messiah with him. Messiah had entered the great cathedral more than any other blazing angel. He even surpassed His Highness Lucifer and Her Highness Carrie. Everyone in heaven could see how much God relied on Her Highness Messiah. The burden on Lucifer's shoulders became heavier. God almost no longer cared about the matters of heaven. Everything fell on him, the deputy of heaven. He was so busy every day that he barely had time to rest. Under such circumstances, the angels became more familiar with and admired the archangel who was closest to them. Your Highness, you should have a good rest. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but say to the archangel. Although with Lucifer's ability, it was almost impossible for him to feel tired. As long as he was a living creature, there would always be times when he was mentally exhausted. Lucifer's pale green eyes were as gentle as usual. I'm fine, Carrie. Gu Xingyin looked at him. You don't have to work so hard. Lucifer's eyes curved, and a trace of gentleness flashed in his eyes. This is God's heaven, and also my most beloved heaven. First update at 4 o'clock p.m. Next update at 10 o'clock p.m. If there were no accidents, the future updates would be at these 2 times. Begging for a monthly ticket. Also from today onwards, Gao Lingji will set a flag and become a little fairy who sleeps early and wakes up early. Chapter 1863. Gu Xingyin looked at Lucifer, and suddenly felt a little ashamed. This seraph archangel truly had faith. He used his body and mind to believe in God. His heart was as good as his appearance. Gu Xingyin knew that she could not compare to him. She lowered her eyes. If her guess was true, she did not want to think about it. But what would come would still come. It was getting closer and closer to the creation celebration. The creation celebration that was held every 100,000 years was the grandest event in heaven. On that day, heaven would invite some other races that loved the light, such as the elves, the dragons, and other races representatives to participate in the creation celebration. This was also the only chance for low-level angels to see God. Since the first creation celebration, every creation celebration was personally organized by Lucifer. The buildings, decorations, banquets, and guests were all arranged by him bit by bit. For Lucifer, heaven was the place where he was born, and it was also the place where he was willing to devote all his energy and effort to. When the creation celebration arrived, The entire heaven already knew that the Son of God, Messiah, was favored. Others had no right to comment on who God favored. But this time, God's preference was too obvious. Many angels complained about the injustice for His Highness Lucifer and Her Highness Carrie. Everyone saw the former's contributions to heaven, and the latter was said to have been injured by dark forces, and had not recovered her strength until now. However, it was said that God had not seen any angels other than His Highness Messiah for hundreds of years, including the seraphs. Even the guests of the elves asked curiously, when they received the invitation, who was His Highness Messiah, whose reputation had spread to the human world. But the arrival of the creation celebration made all the angels forget the worries in their hearts. They were all looking forward to the arrival of this grand event with joy. Gu Xingyin went out these days. Whether it was the seraphs or low-level ordinary angels, they all had happy smiles on their faces. Contrary to all the angels, her mood was getting lower and lower day by day. She still remembered the words of God in a low voice many years ago. During the next creation celebration. The next creation celebration was coming soon. The night before the creation ceremony, Gu Xingyin couldn't help but go to the great cathedral. The great cathedral had always been open to her, but Gu Xingyin hadn't set foot here for several hundred years. If God did not summon her, she would not ask to see Him. God. She didn't bow, but called out to God in a low voice. Night in heaven was just a title. The great cathedral was already filled with holy light. God's voice had never changed, but Gu Xingyin was still surprised when she heard it. Carrie, you are here. Gu Xingyin ignored God's words and asked, will God personally come to the creation celebration tomorrow? Deity replied, of course. Gu Xingyin suddenly raised her head. She was not surprised to see the figure on the throne withdrawing the holy light. God, can you tell me if the creation celebration tomorrow has anything to do with His Highness Lucifer? She had wondered if it would be her, but the situation over the years told her that she was not enough. Her influence among the angels was not strong enough. Chapter 1864. If she wasn't enough, she naturally needed another existence who was more powerful and perfect than her to take on this responsibility. In the entire heaven, only Lucifer had this ability. God knew that Carrie might have guessed something, but He didn't expect her to have guessed to this extent. He didn't speak. At this time, God's silence was the biggest affirmation. Gu Xingyin widened her eyes. There was a huge difference between guessing and knowing the truth. Gu Xingyin used to think that any world she experienced was just an illusion. She had always only cared about two things. One was the task, and the other was the man who had always been with her. But in this world, for the first time, she felt heartache for the other characters in the task world. Gu Xingyin opened her mouth and finally said, His Highness Lucifer will hate. She didn't say what he would hate. Maybe heaven, maybe God, maybe all of them. God finally said, I just want his unwillingness and hatred. The stronger Lucifer's hatred, the better. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but look carefully at the figure on the throne. He still had that indifferent expression, as if saying such words meant nothing to him and couldn't leave any trace in his eyes. Her heart suddenly felt as if ice had been stabbed into her heart. She was completely awake. This man was the God of creation. Lucifer was just his creation. She put away the expression on her face and solemnly bowed to God. I see. Thank you for your explanation. After saying this, she turned and walked toward the door of the great sage hall. But she was stuck in place. She couldn't take another step forward. Gu Xingyin lowered her eyes. God, do you have any other instructions? God's faint voice sounded behind her. Carrie, I haven't seen you for a long time. You want to see me just to ask about Lucifer? Gu Xingyin understood the meaning in his tone, but she wasn't in the mood to talk about romance. She just said in a cold voice, Then should Carrie thank God that he didn't choose me? There was a long silence behind her. Then God's voice continued. Carrie, you are blaming me. This voice did not come from the high and mighty throne, but from Gu Xingyin's ears. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes and said straightforwardly, Yes. She felt something gently leaning on her shoulder. She felt a warm touch through the soft material of her clothes. That was the temperature of God. I'm tired, Carrie, God said in a low voice. Gu Xingyin was stunned for a moment. This was the first time that God had called himself I in front of her. She had been in this world for hundreds of thousands of years, but she had never heard God speak in such a tired tone. I can't bear to part with Lucian, but there's no other way. If Lucian hadn't fallen, this world would have collapsed sooner or later. At that time, apart from me, all the living beings in this world will perish. Everything returned to chaos. Even as a god of creation, there were times when he felt powerless. Gu Xingyin closed her eyes. She asked a question. If I was the one chosen by fate, would God make the same choice? There was silence behind her for a long time. After a long time, Gu Xingyin finally heard the answer she wanted. Yes. Chapter 1865. On the day of the creation ceremony, all the angels put on their most gorgeous formal attire. Gu Xingyin was no exception. But she really couldn't feel better. When she arrived at the scene, Lucifer looked at her worriedly. Kalia, you don't look well. Gu Xingyin forced a smile, and used the excuse that she hadn't rested well because of an old injury. She looked around. The ceremony was about to begin, and all the angels and foreign guests had arrived. She looked at the beautiful Holy Spirit flowers on both sides of the road, and a group of little angels with wreaths on their heads were happily waving their little wings in the air. Everything was peaceful and beautiful. Lucifer frowned in confusion. Why hasn't Messiah arrived yet? As soon as he finished speaking, a familiar figure appeared on the high and mighty divine throne that was independent of all living beings. God. Lucifer bowed. Following Lucifer's action, all the creatures on his left and right bowed to the throne. Gu Xingyin saw that Messiah appeared with God. Many foreigners who came to participate in the ceremony also looked curiously at Messiah, the Holy Son who had been personally led by God. They had heard of this name when they were in the mortal world, and now they saw that he was indeed very favored. God's indifferent voice sounded throughout heaven, announcing the official start of the creation ceremony. All the angels worshipped, sang hymns, and the angel army showed their power. After a series of routine ceremonies, God stood up. The whole square suddenly became quiet. God said to Messiah, who was standing quietly on the side, Messiah, come to me. Messiah was a little confused but still walked out. Gu Xingyin lowered her gaze. God summoned Messiah to his side. All the creatures were in an uproar. Messiah was standing far beyond the position where a seraph should be close to God. Lucifer also frowned. He was a seraph with a very strict personality. The laws of heaven were drafted by him, so he naturally couldn't accept such a violation. But such a violation seemed to be allowed by God, so he didn't say anything. God's next words were like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. The Son of God, Messiah, is the inheritor of my gospel. The Messiah is my left and right hand. She should be the most honorable person under me. Everyone looked at Lucifer. What did God's words place Lucifer, who was the deputy king of heaven? Beneath the gods, the archangel was revered. This knowledge was deeply ingrained in the minds of all living beings. What right does Messiah have? Lucifer's face turned pale. He did not avoid it. Instead, he raised his head and looked directly at the god. God, I don't understand. His pale blue eyes were filled with pure confusion. The development of this situation was completely out of his expectations. Messiah herself was dumbfounded. He didn't feel that this was a special honor at all. Almost at the instant the mythological words ended, he felt countless gazes landing on him. It was as if there were thorns on his back. The Messiah wanted to cry in his heart. He didn't want this supreme honor at all, really. He never felt that he was better than His Highness Lucifer. The seraphs also looked at God in shock, and then looked at Lucifer blankly. They didn't seem to understand why God would suddenly say such a thing. Chapter 1866. God didn't give anyone an answer. This wasn't the end. God suddenly turned to look at Lucifer. The Holy Son is honorable. Lucifer, you are the head of the angels. You should lead the angels to kneel and obey the Holy Son. Gu Xingyin could feel that Lucifer, who was standing beside her, stiffened the moment he said this. Before Lucifer could say anything, Samuel stepped forward. This cold and serious angel of death had always worshipped the seraph leader. He couldn't bear to see His Highness Lucifer being humiliated like this. God! How can His Highness kneel to any creature other than you? You said it yourself. His Highness is the star of dawn and the deputy of heaven. He's the first angel below you. Samuel was clearly agitated. Actually, it wasn't just him. After God said this, the angels below were in an uproar. Countless angels were shocked and confused. They couldn't accept this. In the hearts of these angels, His Highness Lucifer was the highest faith in their hearts apart from God. Why would God say something like this? In the face of Samuel's questioning, God coldly said, "Samuel, are you questioning me?" Samuel wanted to say something, but Lucifer suddenly stood up and said softly to him, "Samuel, step back." Samuel looked at His Highness' cold expression and didn't say anything. He retreated to the seraph leader's side. Lucifer walked out step by step, until he stood in the center. He raised his head and looked directly at God, whose face couldn't be seen clearly under the holy light. "God, can you give me a reason?" His expression was calm, but only Lucifer himself knew how chaotic his heart was at that moment. He had never thought that the God he believed in with all his heart would say such words in such a cold tone. Panic, fear, confusion. These emotions intertwined in his heart, but the only thing everyone could see was the blazing archangel with a straight back. God looked coldly at his seraph leader's pale face. "Lucifer, my oracle is the reason." Samuel's face was tense. It seemed that as soon as he realized something was wrong, he would rush out and fight for His Highness. Lucifer suddenly smiled. Holy light, six-winged blazing angel Lucifer had always been known as the #1 beauty in the heavens. When he smiled like this, even the radiance of the sun, moon, and stars were overshadowed by him. Then, all living beings heard this powerful and beautiful blazing angel speak with a smile on her face. He said, "In that case, my God, I refuse." He said he refused God's command. He refused to kneel before the Sun Messiah. Heaven's sky, which had always been clear, suddenly darkened. God's voice was cold. "Lucifer, you dare to disobey the oracle?" Along with this sentence, all of the living beings felt a terrifying pressure that almost suffocated them descend upon them. This was the power of a god. Plop! Plop! The angels and outsiders in the plaza all knelt down, unable to withstand the pressure. The blazing angels couldn't resist this power, and chose to submit. Gu Xingyin's strength had not recovered at all. Of course, she could not withstand it. Even the Holy Sun Messiah was not spared. Only Lucifer stood alone. He endured the terrifying pressure from God and said word by word, "My God, my faith, I follow you devoutly, but I am being treated unfairly. I refuse to accept this." 8th update. Remember to give me a recommendation vote and a monthly vote after you've finished reading my baby. Good night. Chapter 1867. I refuse to accept this. This was the answer the seraph leader gave to God. For the first time in hundreds of thousands of years, he disobeyed God's will. Gu Xingyin knelt heavily on the ground. She felt another strong pressure on her already heavy body. She couldn't hold on any longer, but she only raised her head and looked at Lucifer, who was standing straight in front of her. The pressure they were enduring was just the residual force. Lucifer was the angel who was truly facing God's wrath. Lucifer felt as if his back was about to break. He knew that the gods were forcing him to back down. But he couldn't back down. He couldn't kneel down. He opened his eyes wide and looked at God on the throne, as if he wanted to see through the holy light to see God's expression. He wanted to know if God was as cold as he appeared. In his pale blue eyes, the expectations and dependence he once had for the gods were dying layer by layer. All the angels looked at them. The seraph leader, who had always been noble and dignified, lowered his head. His low voice spread throughout the square. "I would rather die than suffer such humiliation." Countless angels were moved. Under the holy light that no one could see, God's eyes trembled. His cold voice sounded in heaven. "Lucifer, are you really not going to kneel?" Lucifer's expression was already numb. He replied firmly, "I won't kneel." The next moment, something binding the seraph leader's body broke. God's cold voice echoed throughout heaven. "Seraph leader Lucifer, You have abandoned the 7 virtues. You have the original sin of arrogance. You are unworthy of being a seraph leader. You are removed from the position of heaven's deputy ruler. Remove. Lucifer suddenly laughed out loud and interrupted God's words. This is the heaven that I gave my heart and soul to? Arrogance? God, you don't have to use your mouth. He suddenly turned around and faced all the angels kneeling on the square. The seraph leader's accessories fell to the ground layer by layer, and his long golden hair fell down. Lucifer raised his voice and said, If heaven doesn't accept me, I won't force it. I, Lucifer, hereby swear that from today onwards, I will abandon the title of Phil. Lucifer is dead. Only Lucifer is left in the world. Your Highness. Your Highness Lucifer. Your Highness don't. The angels, who were still in a state of confusion, turned pale with fright when they heard this. They could never have imagined that a celebration of the creation of the world would turn out like this. Lucifer raised his eyebrows and smiled. His eyes were full of fierceness, and he no longer had the gentleness of a seraph in the past. This heaven doesn't want me, so what if I overturn it? Your Highness. There was a gust of wind beside Gu Xingyin. By the time she reacted, Samuel had already walked out. Samuel walked to Lucifer's side and knelt down on one knee. He lowered his head. Your Highness Lucifer, please allow Samuel to continue following you. Lucifer's eyes flashed with astonishment. He said coldly, You don't have to do this, Samuel. Samuel shook his head. Your Highness, you've always been my faith. Lucifer was stunned for a moment. A trace of warmth flashed through his dead eyes. Burial, who was kneeling behind Gu Xingyin, also stood up. His face, which had always been lazy and casual, became serious, which was rare. He imitated Samuel and knelt respectfully in front of Lucifer. Your Highness Lucifer, please allow Burial to continue following you. The actions of the 2 seraphs seemed to have broken a shackle. A tsunami-like sound suddenly appeared in the entire square. It was the cry of countless angels. Your Highness Lucifer, please allow us to continue following you. Chapter 1868. Gu Xingyin looked at the scene in front of her in a daze. In her eyes, she saw the angels who were also panicking and at a loss. She saw Messiah standing in front of God at a loss. She saw Lucifer's determined back view, and the high and mighty God whose face could never be seen clearly under the cover of the holy light. She thought, God, you have succeeded. Your goal, the balance of light and darkness in this world, has been preserved. Lucifer, no, he should be called Lucifer now, led nearly 1/3 of the angels of heaven who followed him in the north of heaven. They rebelled. As seraphs, Gu Xingyin and the others were duty-bound to fight. But even Michael, who loved to fight the most, was unwilling to go to the battlefield. That was His Highness Lucifer. How could they meet His Highness on the battlefield one day? But God wanted more than that. God gave an oracle that Michael would take over the position of the commander of the angel army. Gabriel and Raphael would be the deputy commanders to lead the angel army to suppress the rebel angels. Medellin was in charge of handling the matters of heaven. Messiah went to the battlefield. Carrie, Gu Xingyin was in the Seraph Cathedral. She said calmly that her old injuries had not healed, and she was afraid that she could not go to the battlefield. Gabriel and the others looked at her worriedly, afraid that her actions would anger God. But out of the angel's expectations, God did not punish her. He only asked her to rest well. Gu Xingyin was unwilling to see Lucifer, or rather, she did not dare to face Lucifer. He had been abandoned for the sake of this world. In order to maintain balance and prevent the world from collapsing, the powerful Lucifer, who had a strong appeal among the angels, had to fall. Gu Xingyin could understand God's actions rationally, but emotionally, she could not bear it. She closed herself in the hall, and did not go out for a long time. But the system had been dutifully transmitting the news outside to her consciousness. The angel army of heaven was defeated by the rebel army led by Lucifer. Even with Michael around, no seraph was a match for Lucifer. After a few months of stalemate, God used God's descent and descended on the Holy Son Messiah, personally defeating Lucifer. Banished from heaven, the former seraph archangel had fallen into chaos for 9 suns. Finally, when the sun rose on the 10th day, Dark tentacles crawled up his pale blue eyes, and his bright golden hair was dyed with a rich black color. The wings of holy light that he had once been the proudest of had also turned pitch black. From then on, there was no longer a brilliant morning star, only the fallen angel Lucifer. Lucifer led his fallen angel army to invade hell. After a series of swift and decisive suppression, the entire infernal realm acknowledged the fallen angel's position. Lucifer became known as the king of hell, the demon king Satan. After the incident with Lucifer, the entire heaven had suffered heavy losses. On the contrary, the overall strength of hell had greatly increased. This was probably the result that God wanted. The atmosphere in heaven was extremely gloomy. Not a single smile could be seen on the faces of the seraphim highnesses, and the angels were also very careful in their actions. Although those ignorant little angels didn't know what was going on, they didn't dare to play loudly when they saw their teacher's gloomy expressions. Gabriel came to find Gu Xingyin. She looked at Gu Xingyin with a worried gaze. "Your Highness Gabriel, you can't do this." Chapter 1869. It had been decades since Lucifer's incident. Princess Carrie had locked herself in the palace and refused to come out, which was very worrying. Gu Xingyin didn't know who she was competing with. She felt that her behavior was quite pretentious. To be honest, from God's point of view, it was understandable for him to make such a choice. Gu Xingyin even felt that it would have been much better if Carrie had been the one destined at that time, because she knew why God did this and could understand his choice to some extent. But Lucifer didn't know anything. He didn't know that God didn't hate him. In Lucifer's mind, he was the one who was inexplicably abandoned. And he was an angel with such a devout faith. Gu Xingyin didn't even dare to imagine how upset Lucifer must have felt at that time. In the past decades, she had locked herself in this palace and didn't see anyone, including God. She probably just hoped that she could forget some things. Unfortunately, she couldn't. Seeing Gabriel's worried eyes, Gu Xingyin smiled. "I'm fine, Gabriel. I was just recovering." Yes, she had used this excuse to hide for decades. Actually, everyone knew that Carrie's injuries had healed long ago. She was just upset. Seeing her like this, Gabriel heaved a sigh of relief and struck while the iron was hot. "Then I'll set up a small banquet on the moon. Let's get together, okay?" Seeing her expression, Gu Xingyin sighed inwardly. "Okay." Gabriel left happily. She was probably really worried that Carrie would be bored after so many years. When Gu Xingyin went to the moon, she happened to run into Messiah, who had also entered the teleportation array. Seeing Gu Xingyin, Messiah was obviously surprised. He said with a smile, "Long time no see, Princess Carrie." Gu Xingyin nodded at him without saying anything. Messiah was very good at reading people's expressions. She saw that Gu Xingyin was not in the mood to chat, and stood aside very quietly. When they arrived at Gabriel's palace, Gabriel was shocked to see Gu Xingyin and Messiah together. She was worried that Her Highness Kalia would vent her anger on Her Highness Messiah because of Lucifer. All the blazing angels had come to this small gathering. Gu Xingyin could clearly see that although the blazing angels did not show any problems in terms of etiquette, Messiah could hardly get a word in when they were chatting. No matter what, although they knew that His Highness Lucifer's matter was mainly God's will, the blazing angels still couldn't get close to Messiah. Messiah also knew that he probably would not receive any truly warm reception among this group of seraphs. He smiled bitterly in his heart. In fact, he never understood why God had made such an oracle. He had never intended to replace His Highness Lucifer's position. After attending this small gathering, Gu Xingyin returned to her palace. Someone was waiting for her. Gu Xingyin stopped in her tracks. She looked at the silver-haired god sitting on the chair. She stepped forward with a respectful expression and performed a perfect etiquette. "God." The god looked sideways at her and said, "Carrie, after decades, you are finally willing to step out?" Gu Xingyin's expression did not change. Carrie feels that her injuries have recovered a lot. Chapter 1870. God stared at the silver-eyed, silver-haired, and indifferent seraph in front of him, and suddenly sighed. "You still blame me?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "I don't blame you, God," she said calmly. The balance of light and darkness is natural. As the God of creation, there is nothing wrong with making such a choice to maintain the balance of the whole world. God suddenly sneered. It was probably the first time that Gu Xingyin had seen an expression other than indifference on God's face. He said in a hoarse voice, "You don't blame me, but you are no longer close to me." He stood up and looked at Gu Xingyin. "In the end, Carrie, you still can't forgive me." Gu Xingyin shook his head again. "Carrie just felt that you were born to be high and mighty, looking down on all living things. I once had the delusion of entering your world, and that was my biggest mistake." God's expression suddenly changed. He looked at Gu Xingyin, stepped forward, and asked, "What do you mean?" Gu Xingyin raised her head and didn't avoid God's gaze. She replied, "I used to rely on you and adore you. I even thought that God would have the same feelings for me. But I was wrong." She didn't look sad at all. Instead, she looked as if she had seen through everything. "You are the God of creation. Everything in the world is your child. You love everyone. In your heart, nothing can compare with the world you created." She suddenly bent over and knelt down to God, making a big salute. "You are still the God that Carrie believes in most sincerely, but Carrie no longer wants to win your heart." God's mind was shocked. Carrie couldn't have said it more straightforwardly. That was, from now on, between him and her, there would only be a clear relationship between a God and a believer. She had given up on him. For some reason, such a sentence suddenly flashed in God's mind. He raised his hand and pulled Gu Xingyin up. "Carrie, do you know what you are talking about?" Gu Xingyin did not try to break free, because she knew that if God did not want to let go, she would never be able to escape. She lowered her eyes and said, "God, Carrie once asked you if you would make the same choice if I were the one chosen by fate." Deity's eyes dimmed. Gu Xingyin said, "Your answer is yes." She raised her head and looked at God seriously. "Carrie doesn't think your choice is wrong. But Carrie felt that if I treated you as my faith, when I was abandoned, it would only mean that my faith had collapsed. But if I treat you as the only one in my life," her gaze suddenly turned sharp, "then I'd rather die in the name of Jade." When she said this, there was something burning in Carrie's eyes that frightened God. He unconsciously let go of Gu Xingyin's hand. Gu Xingyin took a step back and put away the expression on her face. It was as if she wasn't the one who spoke harshly just now. She said blandly, "So God, in order to prevent us from going to that step, please let go." God's lips trembled. He wanted to say something, but when he saw Carrie's insightful eyes, he just felt that he couldn't say anything. Sensing that God had left, Gu Xingyin breathed a sigh of relief. The system suddenly asked, "Host, are you very sad?" Gu Xingyin smiled bitterly. "Probably." She remembered the way God looked at her when he left. He was probably the one who was hurt the most, wasn't he? Chapter 1871. He was forced to give up his most beloved seraph, and she knew his difficulties but couldn't understand him. Because he was God, he was born the strongest, so he was destined to be the one to bear everything. Gu Xingyin silently said sorry in her heart. After this, Gu Xingyin no longer confined herself to the hall, as if everything had returned to the past. Only in heaven, she would occasionally catch a glimpse, and she would never see the seraph with the 6 wings of holy light again. Gu Xingyin once again became a jobless wanderer. In these decades, because of her injury and the fall of the 3 seraphs, the duties in heaven had undergone a large-scale change. The position of the Dean of the Angel Academy that originally belonged to her was also taken over by Messiah. Gu Xingyin didn't have any objections to this. She had no interest in the so-called power. If she could choose, it was most comfortable to be an idle person who didn't have to care about anything. What surprised everyone in heaven was that after Lucifer fell, God didn't bring up the once most beloved Messiah. All the angels thought that after His Highness Lucifer fell, His Highness Holy Son Messiah would become the new deputy ruler of heaven. But no. Michael, who was once the adjutant of the seraph, took over Lucifer's position and became the new commander-in-chief of the heavenly army, as well as the deputy ruler of heaven. His prestige among the angels grew higher and higher. But only Michael himself knew that he was still far from His Highness Lucifer. Gu Xingyin lived in this heaven for hundreds of years. She still lived in Crystal Heaven, but never went to the great cathedral. She never saw God again except when God summoned the seraphs for a meeting. The system told her that sometimes, when she was resting, God would quietly come to take a look. But he just stood there and didn't say anything, just watched for a while, and then quietly left. Gu Xingyin just pretended not to know. When the flowers bloomed in the human world, Gu Xingyin went to hell. She wore a thick and airtight cloak, hiding all the light power in her body. Although the demons who came and went felt that this person was strange, what kind of people didn't exist in hell? They were just a little curious. Gu Xingyin slowly walked towards hell. A long time ago, she had been to hell. At that time, hell's architecture was strange, and it was a complete mess. Now it looked much better. It was rumored that Demon King Lucifer was a clean freak. The first thing he did after stabilizing his position in hell was to reorganize the order of hell. Now that several hundred years had passed, the atmosphere of the entire infernal realm seemed to have improved significantly. The corners of Gu Xingyin's mouth curled up slightly under the cloak. Lucifer was indeed a very powerful person. No matter where he was, he could always show off his unique style. She listened to the conversation of the hell witches beside her. She had heard that ever since His Highness Lucifer had arrived, the one that all the hell witches wanted to devote themselves to the most was always him. She walked forward slowly. Along the way, Gu Xingyin saw many fallen angels. She couldn't see the beauty and holiness from when she was in heaven at all. These fallen angels had pitch-black wings behind their backs. The most terrifying thing was that their faces were more or less corroded and demonized. These were all wounds caused by the corrosion of the dark power when they fell. The angels who were once known as the most beautiful creatures now looked even more frightening than the devils of hell. Chapter 1872. But even so, fallen angels were still one of the most popular races in hell. Because even if they were fallen, most of them still retained some of the elegance and bearing of angels. And these were things that the demons that grew up in hell could not have. Gu Xingyin swept her gaze over them and quietly walked forward. Hell was also divided into 7 levels. The first few levels were where ordinary demons lived. And from the 5th level onwards, it was where the high-level demons and demon kings lived. The core of hell, the 7th level, was the territory of Demon King Lucifer. It was said that Lucifer personally supervised the design of hell's 7th level and built a magnificent palace that was not inferior to heaven. The other demon kings went to look for Lucifer with envy, but Lucifer only said, "Design it yourself, live it yourself. What do you have to do with me?" Hell's demon kings. How could they know how to design? After stepping into the 5th level, Gu Xingyin could clearly feel the difference. The streets here were very spacious, and the buildings on both sides were more magnificent. Gu Xingyin looked around. Wine shops, dance halls, flower shops, there were all kinds of shops. It was said that in the entire hell, more than 60% of the industries were under Demon King Mammon's name. He was famous for being greedy. Have you heard that His Highness Mammon is holding a ball in the 6th level of hell today? Really? Those who can go are all high-level demons, right? That's not necessarily true. Lord Mammon misunderstood. The entrance ticket is a magic stone. As long as we can afford it, we can enter. I heard that His Majesty Lucifer will also come today. Gu Xingyin's heart moved. She came this time to see Lucifer and his 2 other former companions. If they were also going to the ball, she would not have to visit them one by one. Really? I have to quickly sell a few pieces of jewelry and try to get in. The few succubi were still muttering. Succubi were low-level demons that were very common in hell. They were characterized by their fair skin, beautiful appearance, and lewd personality. They were very popular demons in hell. An azure object suddenly appeared in front of them. The eyes of the succubi on the left lit up. Green magic stone. Such a pure green demon stone was quite valuable. Tell me where Mammon's ball is, and it's yours. An ethereal female voice came from the cloak. The succubus felt her ears go soft. She couldn't help but glance at the cloak. Then, she looked at Gu Xingyin's hand that was reaching out towards the cloak with jealousy. Her hand was as white as jade, and her fingers were slender and perfect. Under the contrast of the green magic stone, She looked even more elegant and beautiful. With just a hand and a voice, this woman was already inferior to who knew how many witches. He wondered what she looked like under that cloak. Just as the succubus was thinking, she suddenly felt a chill all over her body. "What are you thinking about?" She shuddered and suddenly realized something. She didn't dare to look any longer. She lowered her eyes and said respectfully, "Sir, His Highness Maman's ball." Gu Xingyin listened to her quietly. She tossed the green demon stone in her hand and walked towards her destination. The witch took the green demon stone in a daze, as if she hadn't recovered from the cold feeling just now. As she suddenly sucked in a breath of cold air. If she remembered correctly, that person just now actually called His Highness Maman by his name. Chapter 1873. Gu Xingyin quickly found the location of the ball. She didn't go in first. There were many high-level demons guarding the door. Gu Xingyin estimated that with the degree of security, it would be impossible for an ordinary cherub to escape. Gu Xingyin swept her gaze across and found a person who looked like the leader. Seeing someone walking towards him, Barton frowned and shouted, "Go to the door and pay the magic stones. You can enter if the amount is enough." Before he finished speaking, something was thrown at him. Barton reached out to catch it and held his breath. This was a black magic stone with the purest concentration, and it contained a very rich power of darkness. In the infernal realm, other than the demon kings, how many other demons could possess a black magic stone? His attitude instantly changed and he said with a smile, "My lady, I wonder what doubts you have." Gu Xingyin asked indifferently, "I only have one question. Will the Demon King Highness come to the ball today?" When the high-level demon heard this, he smiled with an understanding expression. Obviously, he thought that Gu Xingyin was a demon who wanted to get close to the Demon King. He lowered his voice and said with a smile, "You've found the right person this time. Let me tell you, this time Lord Mammon has paid a huge price. All the Demon King Highness has agreed to participate. Even His Majesty Lucifer, who has never liked demons, will come." As he spoke, he looked at Gu Xingyin's reaction. Gu Xingyin nodded and said, "That thing is yours. Take me in." Barton was wild with joy and hurriedly led Gu Xingyin into the banquet hall. After Gu Xingyin entered, she sent him away. Obviously, she had come very early, and there were not many people at the ball. Only a few guests were sitting and laughing or chatting. Gu Xingyin found a remote corner with a good view and sat quietly. Slowly, more and more people began to gather. Music began to play on the dance floor, and more demons entered the dance floor. Gu Xingyin couldn't help but want to laugh when she saw how serious these demons were. Everyone knew that the demons were greedy and playful by nature. Balls had always been a foul atmosphere, and it was not unheard of for them to directly perform on the spot when they were aroused. However, because Lucifer was coming today, these demons were all asked to dress properly. Furthermore, Mammon had made it very clear that they were not allowed to do anything that would make His Majesty Lucifer unhappy during the ball. Otherwise, no one would be able to protect him. Even so, there was still some simple flirting. Gu Xingyin even saw several high-level demons reaching their hands under the skirts of the female demons beside them. There were also a few demons who tried to get close to Gu Xingyin, but she coldly rejected them. Gu Xingyin waited patiently for a long time. Finally, it was time for the main event. The entire hall instantly quieted down. All the demons held their breaths as they watched the black-haired Demon King slowly walk in from the entrance. Gu Xingyin also opened her eyes wide. He had a beautiful face that was unforgettable, and his black eyes were like ice that could not be melted. His black robe gently floated with each step he took, and the pitch-black wings on his back added a layer of mystery to him. Gu Xingyin finally understood why Lucifer was so popular in the demon realm. His elegant demeanor had not been lost in the slightest because of the fall. Chapter 1874. The rumors were true. All the angels had been corroded by the power of darkness because of the fall. Only Lucifer, the laws seemed to favor him extra, and his appearance did not change at all. However, his appearance did not change, but his temperament was already worlds apart. If it wasn't for the fact that he had the exact same appearance, It would be difficult to recognize that this demon king, who was surrounded by the power of darkness, was actually the glorious blazing angel of heaven. The former blazing angel, at first glance, could only make people think of nobility, gentleness, and light. Lucifer seemed to have a natural charm that made people want to get close to him and be convinced. But the current Satan Lucifer had a temperament that was as cold as 10,000-year-old ice. It was still noble, but it made people revere it and not dare to look at it directly. Behind Lucifer were Samuel and Beryl. The two of them had always been loyal followers of Lucifer from heaven to hell. Gu Xingyin noticed that Samuel was wearing a pitch-black leather glove on his left hand. This was because when he fell, his hand had been corroded by the power of darkness, leaving only a pile of bones. Beryl's left eye looked pitch-black, and he had completely lost his vision. This was the price they had to pay for falling. Gu Xingyin sighed in her heart. Lucifer's seat had long been prepared by Mammon. It was the best and most eye-catching position in the entire ballroom. But Lucifer was obviously not satisfied. He swept his gaze across the entire dance floor. He was really dissatisfied with the demon's dance. If he hadn't promised Mammon, he definitely wouldn't have come to join in on the so-called fun. Gu Xingyin watched as Lucifer walked straight towards her. Then he stopped at the seat he was sitting at. Mammon instantly understood what he meant. He looked at Gu Xingyin, who had been sitting there for a long time. Mammon had been paying attention to this strange black-robed man for a long time. Ever since he arrived, he had been sitting here. The fruit in front of him had not been touched, and the fine wine had not been touched. However, there were all kinds of weirdos in hell, and Mammon would only occasionally take a look. As long as he didn't cause trouble, he wouldn't offend anyone who paid him. But since Lucifer had taken a fancy to this place, he walked up and said to Gu Xingyin, "Dear guest, could you please give up your seat?" He didn't think there was anything wrong with what he said. After all, Lucifer was the king of hell. It was natural for any demon to give up their position to him. Unfortunately, Mammon met Gu Xingyin. She didn't even bother with him. In front of Lucifer, this made it very difficult for Mammon to get off the stage. Mammon's face turned angry. "Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. I'll give you one last chance, all right?" Lucifer looked at Gu Xingyin with an unreadable expression and said to Mammon, "I'll sit here. This place is so big, one more person, one less person, what's the harm?" Mammon's face was ashen, but since Lucifer had already said so, he couldn't say anything. He could only snort coldly at Gu Xingyin and turn to leave. Lucifer sat down opposite Gu Xingyin. Samuel and Beryl, who had been following him, also sat on the other side. Gu Xingyin glanced at Lucifer. The other party didn't seem to have any intention of talking to him. Someone brought over a bright blood-red wine. Gu Xingyin looked at Lucifer's good-looking hand, gently picked up the transparent wine glass, and drank it in one gulp. A beauty, even drinking wine, was a beautiful scene. Lucifer slowly put down the wine glass and looked up at Gu Xingyin. "You've been looking at me for a long time. Is there something you need?" It was over. This world would probably end tomorrow. Was it really that cruel? Was it that cruel? I don't believe it at all. I'm your mother. In the next world's holographic online game, the female lead's attack leader was a nanny. In the new week, if you have a ticket in your hands, give it a try. Chapter 1875. Gu Xingyin didn't say anything, because she saw very clearly that from the moment Lucifer sat here, at least 2/3 of the people on the dance floor were focused on him. This was originally a good place to talk, but after Lucifer came with his own spotlight effect, it was no longer a good place to talk. Lucifer rarely took the initiative to talk to someone, but he was ignored. He raised his eyebrows and seemed surprised, but he wasn't so ungentlemanly as to vent his anger on the other party. He didn't have such thoughts, but it didn't mean that his followers could tolerate it. For example, the Demon King's #1 fan, Samuel. Samuel's cold personality was well known, and his fanatical worship of Lucifer was also known by the entire region. According to him, you could ignore me and offend me. It wasn't a problem. But you definitely couldn't neglect Lucifer. So Samuel snorted and glanced at Gu Xingyin. It wasn't just a simple glance. Beryl, who was sitting beside Samuel, immediately felt the anger from his companion. He glanced at the stranger wrapped in a cloak and didn't say anything. He also couldn't stand this guy who pretended to be mysterious. Out of all the demon's expectations, Samuel's silent but definitely not weak attack landed on Gu Xingyin, but not even a spark splashed. The body under the black cloak was still sitting upright, as if she didn't notice anything. Samuel glanced at Gu Xingyin in surprise. Even Lucifer looked at her for the second time. He knew Samuel's strength. In the entire hell, he was at the top of the Demon King level. Even if he didn't use his full strength just now, it wasn't easy to take it so easily. Unless the other party had the strength of the same level as Samuel. The same level as Samuel, Lucifer's eyes darkened. Clearly, he thought of something bad. His expression also turned cold. He didn't look at Gu Xingyin anymore. Clearly, he wasn't in the mood to care about her. There were many devilish beings on the dance floor who were paying attention to this corner of the dance floor. But less than 10 of them were able to witness the confrontation that had just taken place. Mummin smiled and let go of the witch in his arms. He raised his head and drank a mouthful of wine. He said to Bar, who was beside him, "It looks like Samuel suffered a loss this time." Just like Mummin, Baal was a demon king born and raised in hell. He had always disliked the way the fallen angels did not resemble hell at all. This time he was very happy to see Samuel suffer. Serves him right. I've been ignoring him for a long time. Lucifer came to the dance floor to participate in the literal meaning of the word participation. From the beginning to the end, he just sat there quietly and slowly drank his wine. He didn't even take a step away. During this period, there was no lack of courageous witches who came forward to recommend themselves, but it was clear that they couldn't even get past Samuel. Samuel's thoughts were simple. What kind of existence was His Majesty Lucifer? These lowly witches actually dared to dream of getting their hands on him? Gu Xingyin sat quietly until she saw Lucifer and the others leave first. She didn't follow them. If she did, it would be too conspicuous. After a long time, Gu Xingyin confirmed that there were no more devils looking over here before she got up and left. From afar, Baal looked at her back. "Do you want to follow and take a look?" Chapter 1876. Mammon shook his wine glass. What are we going to do with Lucifer's excitement? He had clearly seen through the black-robed man's purpose. Baal thought for a moment. It did not seem to have anything to do with him, so he let her be. Gu Xingyin did not stop at all, and headed straight for the 7th level of hell. She had left a mark on the system earlier, so she could see clearly that after Lucifer left, he went straight back to the 7th level of hell. There was no obstruction. Gu Xingyin was certain that the other party had already known of her whereabouts. She decided not to conceal herself any longer, and let her figure be exposed. Seeing the palace in front of her, Gu Xingyin was shocked. This style, she lowered her eyes. After so many years, Lucifer had never forgotten heaven. There were a few beautiful maids standing at the entrance of the hall. They were not surprised to see her. "Esteemed guest, please follow me." They led Gu Xingyin inside. After passing through a few long corridors, they arrived outside a very quiet hall. The maid bowed to Gu Xingyin. "Esteemed guest, please enter by yourself. We are not qualified to enter the hall to serve you." Gu Xingyin lifted his leg and walked inside. At first glance, she saw the Demon King sitting high up on the throne. Samuel and Beryl sat on the left and right respectively. They had obviously been waiting for a long time. Lucifer saw her and said, "I wonder which old friend has come to hell?" When he was still a seraph, he had made many friends. In the heavens and the earth, there was no existence that Lucifer did not know of with the strength that Gu Xingyin had just revealed. It was just that he was not sure who it was. Gu Xingyin sighed and finally said, "Your Highness." As soon as she finished speaking, she reached out and lifted the cloak on her head. Samuel and Beryl's expressions suddenly changed. Lucifer's expression did not change when he saw this face, but his eyes darkened for a moment. He did not speak, but Samuel had already regained his composure. He said coldly, "Carrie, this is hell. You shouldn't be here." He didn't address Gu Xingyin as Your Highness. Ever since they fell from the sky, the friendship between them had long disappeared. Gu Xingyin smiled. "I'm just here to see an old friend." The word old friend stunned Samuel. and Burial, who had been lazing in his seat, was even more moved. Lucifer stopped smiling and looked at Gu Xingyin. He repeated her words, "Old friend." It was impossible to tell if he was happy or angry. He said in an indifferent voice, "Since when did the demon king of hell and the blazing angel of heaven become friends?" Gu Xingyin shook her head. "It has nothing to do with heaven or hell. Carrie will always remember the friendship of hundreds of thousands of years." The hall fell into silence. After a long time, Lucifer said faintly, "Hell doesn't welcome angels from heaven. I won't blame you this time. Carrie, go. Don't come again." Gu Xingyin was not surprised by this. She smiled. "Just in time. I'm also here to say goodbye to your highness and a few old friends." Lucifer looked at her strangely, as if he did not understand the meaning of her words. Gu Xingyin did not explain. Instead, she said softly, "Your highness, can you give me some time alone?" Lucifer turned and looked at her for a long time. Finally, he turned to Samuel and Beryl. "You can leave." The two glanced at Gu Xingyin and left obediently. Chapter 1877. Lucifer looked at Gu Xingyin and asked, "What do you want to say?" Gu Xingyin slowly walked forward, and her eyes suddenly flashed. Lucifer was stunned. Countless scenes appeared in his mind. Gu Xingyin was the first to see a panicked expression on his face. She didn't speak, quietly waiting for Lucifer to calm down. After a long time, Lucifer came back to his senses. He still had a smile on his face, but there was a trace of anger in his words. "So, this is the reason why I was abandoned?" What Gu Xingyin told him just now was what she knew. She didn't answer Lucifer's question. Lucifer would judge what the truth was himself. Lucifer sneered, "What a noble choice. Am I not very noble, sacrificing myself for the sake of all things in the world?" He didn't wait for Gu Xingyin's answer, but laughed alone. Perhaps this was the first time Lucifer showed all his resentment in front of an outsider. He turned around and stared at Gu Xingyin. "I don't care if you're telling me this under his instructions or not. But I, Lucifer, can tell you clearly that in this life, I will never forgive you." Gu Xingyin wasn't surprised to hear this answer. She said, "I told you this just to say goodbye to an old friend. No matter what, Your Highness, as the person involved, you should know these things." Lucifer heard that her tone seemed to be wrong. But his mind was in a mess now, and he couldn't think clearly. Gu Xingyin looked at the time and said to Lucifer, "Your Highness, say goodbye to Samuel and Beryl for me. I won't see them alone anymore." She didn't wait for Lucifer's reply. She turned and walked out. Gu Xingyin, who left hell, went straight to heaven. She went to the great cathedral. This was the first time in hundreds of years that she took the initiative to enter the great cathedral. God sat on the throne and waited for her. Gu Xingyin said softly, "God, I went to see Lucifer." God replied, "I know." His attention had been on Carrie the whole time, and he had seen clearly how she had gone to hell. Gu Xingyin walked forward step by step and suddenly asked, "God, can I hug you?" God's golden eyes suddenly shone. He looked at Gu Xingyin and said with a trace of expectation, "Carrie." Gu Xingyin smiled. "I admire you, God. Carrie never changes what she says." She leaned over and gave him a hug while God looked lost. The moment she let go of God's hand, her voice rang softly in God's ear. "God, Carrie has never blamed you. You are a great God, and Carrie will always believe in you." God felt that something was wrong, but he didn't notice what was wrong. He watched as Gu Xingyin walked out of the great cathedral. When she returned to her palace, the system asked her, "Are you ready?" Gu Xingyin nodded, "Yes." She lay on the bed and allowed her soul to leave this world bit by bit. Her mission in this world had been completed long ago. Just as she had said, she was going to hell to bid farewell to her old friend. Gu Xingyin didn't know how she would face God in the future, so she chose to escape. "I'm sorry, my lover." She gently closed her eyes. Chapter 1878. The god in the great sage hall suddenly felt his heart palpitate. The god of creation had never experienced this feeling before. In the next moment, he appeared in Carrie's palace. Seeing the silver-haired figure lying on the bed, God was relieved. However, this feeling of panic didn't subside. He couldn't help but reach out his hand to cover his heart. What happened? At this moment, Carrie, who was lying on the bed, woke up. Her silver-white eyelashes fluttered. She finally looked at God standing by the bed. With just one look, God felt like he was struck by lightning. Uncontrollable panic rose from the bottom of his heart. He watched as Carrie sat up. God, why are you here? Carrie asked in surprise. God didn't say anything. He looked at the figure in front of him quietly. She had a face that he couldn't be more familiar with. Her silver eyes were pure and flawless. At a glance, it was full of faith and infatuation for God. She was perfect. But he knew that this wasn't Carrie. God instantly understood why he felt something was wrong with what Carrie had said to him just now. She was clearly saying goodbye. God's heart was suddenly filled with boundless fury and a storm. She had actually abandoned him and left just like that. His powerful divine sense instantly spread to every corner of the world. He didn't believe that even if he died, even if he turned into ashes, he could still find Carrie. God searched over and over again, but there was nothing. He couldn't find any trace of Carrie's existence in this world. He didn't care about the terrified Carrie. He went straight back to the great sage hall. The book of creation panicked. God, what's wrong? It could sense that God's emotions were very unstable right now. Before the book of creation finished speaking, God suddenly raised his hand. Golden light shone in his palm. In the void in front of him, scenes quickly changed. The book of creation was so shocked that it lost its voice. God was using time reversal. God's golden eyes calmly found a point. The next moment, he appeared in a certain scene. It was the moment when Carrie said goodbye to him. He looked over with rapt attention. It wasn't her. Even if he went back in time, he couldn't find her. God suddenly sat down dejectedly. The book of creation asked cautiously, God did not answer. Even when he learned that there was an imbalance between light and darkness in the world, and he had no way to solve it, he had never felt so powerless. Suddenly his expression shook. Countless scenes of reincarnation flashed past his golden eyes. The pair of golden eyes flickered several times before finally returning to calmness. The book of creation, which had been sitting quietly by the side, suddenly began to tremble. It suddenly felt that its master's aura seemed to have changed. Compared to the previous God, it was even more unfathomable and made people fear and submit to it. God glanced at a certain spot in the void. That glance seemed to have penetrated countless spaces and accurately landed on someone's body. Gu Xingyin, who had just finished her mission and returned to the space, frowned. She didn't know why, but she felt that someone was looking at her. It was probably just an illusion. She shook her head and ignored it. In another world, the silver-haired, golden-eyed man murmured softly, Ayin, for watches. Chapter 1879. When Gu Xingyin woke up again, she found herself in a very strange place. The blue sky and white clouds above her head, the green grass under her feet, and the grass was dotted with countless sporadic flowers. Everything was so beautiful that it was a bit unreal. It was indeed unreal. After receiving the world's storyline, Gu Xingyin understood where she was. She was in a game at the moment. This game was the world-famous holographic MMORPG Fantasy, which focused on the Western fantasy style. The original name was Qin Liqing, and she played as a mage in the game. She was actually a healer. Now that holographic games were highly developed, there were even many people who gave up their real-life professions to make money in the game. Dark Fragrance Sleeves was one of them. The ID Dark Fragrance Sleeves was quite famous in the game Fantasy, and she could be considered an expert. The server Dark Fragrance Sleeves was in Dragonroar Valley, was one of the most popular servers in Fantasy, and the guild she was in, Ironblood Lofty Guild, was also one of the top 10 guilds in the entire server. Don't look at the top 10, it didn't sound that impressive. The entire Dragonroar Valley server had over 100,000 players online, and a guild that could enter the top 10 was a large guild with thousands of people. Although Dark Fragrance Sleeves wasn't part of the guild's management, she was the #1 mage in the guild. Logically speaking, there were very few people who could be very proficient in the mage class, and there were even fewer girls who were proficient in the mage class. Dark Star Full Sleeves should have been one of the most popular players in the guild. According to the original storyline, she would have stayed in Iron Blood Lofty Guild, and she would have done well. However, she offended someone. It couldn't be said that she offended someone. When they were fighting for a hidden boss in the wild, Dark Fragrance Sleeves and another group of people met. Everyone knew that hidden bosses often dropped good things, so they naturally wouldn't give up. Then, with Hidden Fragrance as the leader, the party directly annihilated the other party. This kind of thing wasn't too much. However, in the other party's team, there was a player who was known as the #1 beauty in the Dragon Roar server. That female mage called Enchanting Beauty hated Dark Fragrance Sleeves because of this. Then, in less than 2 days, Enchanting Beauty left her previous guild and joined Iron Blood Lofty Guild. How much face did the #1 beauty have? It was enough for most of the men in the gang to treat her differently. Not only did Exceptional Beauty want to find trouble with Dark Star Flowing Sleeves, she also wanted to replace her as the #1 mage in Iron Blood Pride. She began to cause trouble for Dark Fragrance Sleeves in all sorts of ways. Dark Fragrance was usually busy doing quests to earn money, so she didn't have time to make friends. At times like this, her disadvantage was revealed. Dark Fragrance was forced out of the guild by Exceptional Enchanting Beauty. This was not enough. Dark Fragrance, who had lost the guild's protection, was even easier to bully. She went to look for medicinal herbs, and Stunning Beauty led a large group of people to follow her. She asked for a party in the World Channel, and Stunning Beauty immediately led a team to open the instance dungeon in front of her. Not only that, she was often forced to PK for no reason. All in all, in the end, Dark Fragrance had no other choice but to abandon her account and start over on a different server. Gu Xingyin stretched his back and said, "System, draw a skill." Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining the Demonic Sex Supreme Martial Art, Xianming Divine Skill. Chapter 1880. Gu Xingyin was quite satisfied. Because this skill, the system told her that she couldn't use it in real life, but in the holographic online game, she only needed to click on Learn to learn it. And she could use it freely. What was the Xianming Divine Art? When she was Wu Yili, it was a martial arts secret book. In the martial arts world, it was considered a top secret book. In addition, she didn't have any restrictions in the online game world, so she could use it. In short, that was Dark Fragrance went from a standard healer, who was only suitable to stand behind a swordsman, to a true martial arts expert. Thank goodness for the holographic online game. If it was a keyboard game, it wouldn't be so easy. Gu Xingyin secretly glanced at Dark Fragrance's equipment. Oh, they were all level 7 enchantment stones. The equipment was quite good. But she glanced at the enchantment stones that were basically all health and defense attributes, and unloaded them all without saying anything. Attack, attack, all attack. And agility. Oh right, and critical hit. After quickly replacing all the enchantment stones on her equipment, Gu Xingyin nodded in satisfaction. This was much more pleasing to the eye. She looked at the weapon in her hand, Harris's staff, a golden godly weapon. At the end of a turn, it would automatically absorb 5% of the opponent's attack and 5% of their health. It could be used 3 times per turn. In the entire server, this godly weapon was an extremely coveted existence. There was once a rich person who offered 200,000 federal coins, but Dark Fragrance wasn't willing to sell it. Exceptional Enchantment was jealous for a long time. But even in the original story, when Dark Fragrance abandoned her account and sold it, she didn't get a good deal. Gu Xingyin looked at the time. At this time, Exceptional Enchantment had just joined Iron Blood Heroic Guild, and showed signs of discord with Dark Fragrance. In the original story, Dark Fragrance didn't take this seriously at first, but when she did, she found that the entire guild was leaning towards Exceptional Enchantment. She stood in place for a while, then returned to the guild. Sistering Xiao. A cheerful voice shouted from behind her. Gu Xingyin turned around and saw a very familiar person. Tang Sek's dumb pig, a professional assassin. She was a female player who often partnered with Dark Fragrance to open dungeons. The two of them had a pretty good relationship. Gu Xingyin smiled. Idiot. Dumbo was the abbreviation of the Tang Sek's Dumbo. This was her own request. Gu Xingyin couldn't quite understand why a girl would give herself such a name. After all, it was easy to associate it with the image of the second senior brother in a very popular TV series of the last century. Tang Menju walked over to Gu Xingyin in a daze. His handsome face was filled with indignation. She said, "Sistering Xiao, I just heard enchanting beauty and the others badmouthing you again." Gu Xingyin looked cold. "She's just a woman who talks nonsense. Don't pay attention to her." "Speak of the devil." An enchanting voice rang out from behind. "Aya, isn't this our great god Dark Fragrance?" Gu Xingyin turned around and looked at the mage who was known as the #1 beauty in Dragon's Cry. In all fairness, exceptional enchantment was indeed very good-looking. Willow leaf eyebrows, peach blossom eyes, seductive eyes, red lips. Mages were all dressed in white priest robes. It was supposed to be a very serious outfit, but when worn by this woman, it looked like a brothel. This could be considered a skill. Chapter 1881. Gu Xingyin faintly said, "Oh, so it's exceptional enchanting beauty." The stunning beauty frowned. She felt that today's Dark Fragrance flowing sleeves seemed to be different from before. But she couldn't tell what was different. She turned her gaze and her face instantly changed into a gentle expression. "I want to go to a dungeon. I don't know if you're willing to bring me along?" Gu Xingyin looked at the guild members walking around and sneered in his heart. It's like this again. In the original storyline, Exceptional Enchanting purposely picked a time when there were many guild members to find Dark Fragrance. She wanted her to be free labor. And before they fell out, Dark Fragrance would always agree to Exceptional Enchanting's request because they were in the same guild, and she couldn't refuse in front of so many people. If Gu Xingyin had to say, then this girl was really stupid. It was just the online world. What was there to be afraid of? If she wasn't willing, then she could just refuse. Looking at Exceptional Enchanting's confident expression, Gu Xingyin slowly said, "I actually have time." Exceptional Enchanting's face had an expression of as expected. Then she heard the second half of Gu Xingyin's sentence. "But I'd rather go offline and sleep than bring you along." Exceptional Enchanting's face instantly turned ashen. The people who were listening to their conversation all looked at Dark Fragrance strangely. Did Dark Fragrance eat the wrong medicine today? Why was she so angry? The smile on Exceptional Enchanting's face could no longer be maintained. She looked at Gu Xingyin and coldly said, "Great God, what do you mean by this?" Gu Xingyin tilted her head and looked at her exquisite and beautiful staff. She casually said, "What do I mean? Of course it's the literal meaning. I don't like looking at you and I don't want to see you. Is there a problem?" A male player couldn't stand it and stood up. "Dark Fragrance, we're all in the same guild. You don't have to be so mean." Gu Xingyin looked at him and retorted, "Why can't I say who I like and who I don't like? Do I have to kneel down and lick someone's boots with a smile, even though I hate them in my heart?" She glanced around and sneered. "I know that some of you will think that I'm narrow-minded, and some of you will think that I'm jealous. It doesn't matter. No matter what you think, I hidden fragrance sleeves just don't like the sight of enchanting beauties." She looked at Stunning Beauty and sneered. "Don't pretend to be an innocent white lotus in front of me. Who was the one who brought people to stop me in the Maple Valley instance 2 days ago? Who was the one who robbed me of the alchemist's mission yesterday? Even if I don't say it, it doesn't mean I don't know." She slammed the staff in her hand onto the ground, and a burst of golden light spread out. "Seductive Beauty, let's not beat around the bush. If you don't like me and want to target me, then just say it. Do you want to PK, or what you want? Just say it directly. Don't play some dirty tricks behind my back. I'm disgusted by it." Gu Xingyin was in a good mood after venting her anger. Stunning Beauty looked at her and gnashed her teeth. "Dark Star Fragrance sleeves, don't slander me." Gu Xingyin didn't even want to look at her. "Slander me? Who doesn't know that I, Hidden Fragrance Sleeves, don't care about anything other than making money? Is money important to you? Do you think that I don't want to frame you when I'm making money? Do you really think you're something?" Her words were very crude. It was because of this crudeness that many people believed her words. Chapter 1882. Everyone thought about it and found it reasonable. Dark Fragrance was famous for her love for money. Everyone knew that this girl was always focused on earning money. She had almost never offended anyone because of anything. She didn't have any enmity with Exceptional Alluring Beauty, so why would she wrongly accuse her? Quite a few people looked at Exceptional Alluring Beauty with strange gazes. Gu Xingyin knew that she couldn't win against Exceptional Alluring Beauty in this guild. She knew the relationship between Exceptional Alluring Beauty and the guild leader, Iron Blood. Sure enough, she soon received a private message from Iron Blood. Iron Blood's words weren't too polite, but they weren't too rude either. After all, Dark Fragrance was the #1 mage of Unyielding Spirit. If their relationship was ruined, it would be a huge loss to Unyielding Spirit. According to Dark Fragrance's original personality, Iron Blood might have acted as a mediator and let the two of them shake hands and make peace. This matter would have passed. However, Gu Xingyin knew that if you fell out with someone like Exceptional Alluring Beauty, then don't think about coexisting peacefully with her. She didn't waste any words and directly sent a message. I don't believe you don't know what Exceptional Alluring Beauty has done. I'll just say this. If there's me, then there's her. If there's her, then there's me. Iron Blood really did know. When he knew that Exceptional Alluring Beauty was targeting Dark Fragrance, he had warned her a few times. However, after Exceptional Alluring Beauty threw a few tantrums, Iron Blood had no choice but to patiently coax her and tell her not to go too far, so he turned a blind eye to it. Gu Xingyin sneered. This was the guild leader? She didn't expect to force Exceptional Alluring Beauty away at all. She just wanted to completely break off relations with Exceptional Alluring Beauty. One day later, Gu Xingyin successfully became a free mage. As an expert in the top 10 of the profession rankings, when the guild behind Dark Fragrance's ID changed to, it attracted the attention of countless people. System, strike first and gain the advantage. Gu Xingyin said indifferently. The system replied, don't worry, host. In such a technologically advanced plane, it was really quite convenient for the system to cheat. In less than 10 seconds, an emotional and reasonable explanation was posted on the forum of Fantasy Fiend. The content was very simple. Hidden Fragrance and Exceptional Alluring Beauty had a grudge against each other, from the initial boss fight to her joining the guild, including Exceptional Alluring Beauty's various secret attacks. There were screenshots and chat records, as well as Hidden Fragrance's sudden departure from the guild. No one recognized the ID of the poster, but everyone's focus was not on it. Dark Fragrance and Enchanting Beauty were both well-known figures in this server, especially since both of them were mages and both of them were female. It was even more of a topic of discussion. However, Gu Xingyin didn't care about what happened next. What she wanted to do was to prevent that stunning and enchanting woman from using this opportunity to ruin her reputation. As for the blow, she believed that the bewitching beauty would not let her off so easily. When the time came, it would be better to use force to teach her a lesson. Gu Xingyin had a chest full of depression that she had nowhere to vent. Exceptional Alluring Beauty looked at the post on the forum, and then looked at the unfinished crying post on her photon computer. She clenched her teeth and deleted it. She had painstakingly prepared for half an hour, and now it was all in vain. She was still preparing to lead a wave of public opinion. Damn that Dark Fragrance, how could she be so fast? 8 o'clock ended. There were no more chapters in the previous world. It felt like everything that needed to be written had been finished. Asking for a vote for the new world's female lead, Dark Fragrance. Originally, I wanted to shamelessly ask for a vote. Good night, everyone. Chapter 1883. Exceptional Enchanting was very angry in her heart. She thought for a bit and opened her friend's interface. Exceptional Enchanting's naturally beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness. Dark Fragrance, since you don't want to give me face, then don't blame me for not giving you any face. As the #1 beauty of Dragon Roar, Exceptional Enchanting had a wide range of friends. Of course, most of them were male players who were willing to be at her beck and call. Exceptional Enchanting quickly found people. With such a team, they could definitely teach Dark Fragrance a lesson. She confidently thought. In the Dark Forest, A figure wearing a pure white mage robe was bending over to look for something. This mage was Gu Xingyin. Qin Liqing's life could be said to be rough. Her parents divorced when she was 10 years old, and each of them had a new family. As a burden, she was sent to her grandmother's house in the countryside to grow up. When she was 18 years old, her grandmother passed away. Her parents felt that they had fulfilled their obligations, and completely began to treat this daughter as if she didn't exist. Her university expenses were all earned through scholarships and working part-time. After graduation, she stayed in the city where she went to university. Qin Liqing's biggest wish in life was to be able to buy her own house in this city and give herself a home. She didn't want to find her irresponsible parents. Of course, even if she did, there might not be any results. But with her salary and the holidays here, Qin Liqing helplessly found out that even if she worked hard for 10 years, she could barely afford a bathroom. Until she came into contact with Fantasy Fiend. After finding out that she was one of the rare talented players, and that the money she earned in the game was more than 10 times her salary, Qin Liqing decisively gave up on her real-life job and devoted herself to the game. She had already calculated that with her current income, she would be able to pay the down payment after saving for another year. So she played the game even more desperately to earn money, accept all kinds of quests, dungeons, rare materials. Because this kind of game didn't lack rich people. Whenever she got a rare equipment, there would always be all sorts of idiots who would come knocking on her door in minutes. Then, everyone would have a happy transaction. All the players in the Dragon Roar server knew that Dark Fragrance was a player who only cared about money. Fortunately, although Dark Fragrance loved money, she still had her principles. She wasn't someone who would do anything for money. Her reputation in the server wasn't bad. Gu Xingyin had accepted a quest to search for a material called the Evening Primrose. The Evening Primrose was a very rare material. To Gu Xingyin it was actually useless. However, the price was inflated to a sky-high level. Because it was beautiful. Regardless of whether it was forging equipment or fashion items, as long as the Moon Primrose was infused into a piece of equipment, the entire item would gain an additional layer of fantasy effects. The quality of the equipment would instantly rise by 2 grades, and fashion items would be even more so. Due to the realistic effects and picturesque scenery, there were many female players in fantasy. Since it was a girl's nature to love beauty, the Evening Primrose was undoubtedly a highly sought-after resource. However, the Evening Primrose only grew in the Black Devil Forest, and finding it was a test of one's luck. In the past, a player had wandered the Black Devil Forest for 10 whole days without finding a single stalk of Moon Primrose. From this, one could see just how difficult it was to find. Chapter 1884. If it was any other time, Dark Fragrance Sleeves would not deliberately spend time looking for Moon Primrose. But who asked her to meet a big tycoon? That young lady who did not eat the hardships of the world was willing to exchange 10,000 crystals for a Moon Primrose. Crystals were the common currency in the game, and the exchange rate was 1-to-1 with federal dollars. 10,000 crystals. Dark Fragrance Sleeves sometimes had to work hard for 10 days to earn, so of course, she did not hesitate to accept. Thus, Gu Xingyin was now wandering around the Black Devil Forest. The Black Devil Forest was like its name. The entire forest was dark and gloomy, and there was a gloomy atmosphere everywhere. The simulation effect of the game Fantasy was 100% real, including the 5 senses. However, the 5 senses could be adjusted by 50%, and the same was true for the appearance. Thus, Gu Xingyin understood very well that the beautiful and enchanting face that could be said to be a source of calamity might not be real. She slowly wandered around the Black Devil Forest. From time to time, she would have to dodge some plants that would suddenly attack her. If she didn't manage to dodge them, she would find that she had a 5-second stun buff on her body, or that she would be bitten by something and lose her HP. Gu Xingyin did not change her expression as she swung her staff and killed an owl monster. She thought to herself that it was no wonder that many female players did not dare to come to the Black Devil Forest alone. She slowly moved forward and found that there were 2 players not far in front of her. Gu Xingyin glanced from afar. Yes, the other party hid their ID. She did not pay much attention to it. In such a big black devil forest, it was normal for other players to be around. She did not pay attention to the other party, but the other party noticed her. "Brother, look, that is dark fragrance sleeves." A clear female voice was heard. Looking at her attire, this girl was playing as an archer. This valiant archer with a delicate face and a slender figure had an ID that didn't match her looks at all. It was the big man who picks his feet. The black-clothed man standing beside her seemed to have merged into the darkness. If one did not look carefully, they would not even notice his existence. But if you saw him, you would no longer be able to ignore his existence. That was because his face was very eye-catching. In short, he was handsome. Unlike the delicate and beautiful young men who were popular nowadays, this man's handsomeness was very clean and neat. His facial features were handsome, and his eyes were cold. Just by standing there, he could easily make people think of a proud pine tree. If Gu Xingyin saw this face, she would know who this man was. Because this face was too famous. Dragon Roar's #1 assassin was also the #1 player on the PK leaderboard. Qi Li, a man as mysterious as his profession. He didn't join any guilds, and he always appeared and disappeared mysteriously. Regardless of whether it was clearing dungeons or secret dungeons, he would only join his own fixed team. The various large guilds of Dragon Roar had once thrown him an olive branch, but he had rejected all of them. He had many enemies in the sound of Dragon Roar. But now those enemies had all disappeared from this server. In short, this was a man who could not be messed with. Of course, Gu Xingyin would not provoke him. Qi Li didn't answer. If he didn't pick his feet, the other party wouldn't care. She continued, "Brother, isn't our team just missing a mage? I quite like dark fragrance sleeves. Now that she has left the guild, why don't I ask her?" Chapter 1885. Qi Li finally spoke. "There's no rush. Don't scratch his feet," pouted. She knew that her brother had always been proud and arrogant. When he said there was no rush, it meant that he wanted to observe and see if the hidden fragrance sleeve talisman was to his liking. Looking at the white figure in the distance that was extremely conspicuous in the Black Devil Forest, she sighed in her heart. Hidden fragrance sleeve isn't a nameless mage. Don't let her be taken away by someone else before you've finished observing her. Gu Xingyin didn't know that the two players that she didn't even notice were discussing her. She was still looking for the moon primrose very seriously. Perhaps it was because of her heaven-defying luck that she found a moon primrose in just an hour. 10,000 crystal coins per hour. This was a good deal. Gu Xingyin put away her staff. With a flash of light, an exquisite dagger and a jade box appeared in her hand. These two items weren't very valuable in fantasy. It was true that the game was very realistic. Even the materials needed to be picked properly and stored in special jade boxes. Otherwise, the effects of the moon primrose would worsen if it was casually placed in the inventory. After carefully putting the moon primrose into her bag, Gu Xingyin looked around and planned to walk around again. It seemed that her luck wasn't bad. What if she could find another moon primrose? On the other hand, Don't Scratch His Feet, who was following her from afar, exclaimed in envy. Hidden Fragrance Sleeve actually found a moon primrose. As a girl, there was no one who didn't like beautiful things. Qi Li didn't have much of a reaction to this. For an assassin who paid attention to hiding and keeping a low profile, the moon primrose naturally had the effect of gathering light. It was useless to him. Next, Don't Scratch His Feet looked at Hidden Fragrance Sleeve with a numb expression. In just 2 hours, she had found another 2 moon primrose. She muttered, "This dark fragrance flowing sleeves can't be cheating, right? If not, with her character, why would she play games to earn money? She should just buy lottery tickets." Although she said that, she was already counting her wallets. She decided that she would send a private message to Hidden Fragrance Sleeves later. She had to buy a moon primrose. Qi Li was also staring at Gu Xingyin, but his focus was obviously different from his sister's. Quick reaction and decisive action. A hint of regret flashed in Qi Li's eyes as he commented, "It's a pity that such a person is playing as a mage." Upon hearing his elder brother's comment, Big Brother not picking his feet asked in surprise, "What did you say, Big Brother?" Was it a pity to be a mage? What do you think is suitable for her to play? Chili replied, assassins, archers, or swordsmen with high agility are all fine. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that this dark fragrance was an offensive player. Why did she have to play a mage? Hearing this, the hobo man looked at Gu Xingyin with great interest. There weren't many people who could receive such praise from his brother. Chili had already made his decision. Let's find hidden fragrance sleeves. Brother, didn't you say that you wanted to observe for a while? Hearing this, big man not picking his feet asked in surprise. Chili curled his lips into a smile. I'm done. Don't scratch his feet. All right, whatever her big brother said she would do. The two of them walked towards Gu Xingyin, but a group of people suddenly appeared out of nowhere. You're tuning in to the Earbook Haven YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.